Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair, do you feel that they had good psychology or bad psychology in the ring?
Well, I'd say Flair had no psychology, period. I don't know if someone could show me where he ever had a psychology. Never had any that I ever saw or ever witnessed in my experiences with him in the ring. And I don't mean that as going after Flair here, but Rick really didn't have much psychology. Rick was a hard worker that, when in doubt, he did the same things that he remembered how to do. And he always did what he had his routines, I can remember Rick sometimes 2 or 3 times in a match doing the upside down turnbuckle, coming up off the corner, running down, peel him off the top. I mean, when you do it 3 times in 15 minutes, you go, what is this guy doing? Like, he doesn't know what he's doing, but it's all action. And you can't deny that he's working hard. But does it make any sense? No. Hogan had pretty good psychology in the sense that, he reminded me of my brother Bruce's psychology. His psychology, which only worked really for Hogan, was to have the whole world fall on him. If he had 10 guys on him, he would, he liked to fight against insurmountable odds. And Hogan had the look that he could, when he started knocking these guys down and cleaning house on 6 or 7 guys and dumping the manager, and, it was believable, and it always got that reaction. But if Hogan's psychology, if he was 210 pounds, or he was like Brian Blair's size, and that psychology would have meant nothing. He had no psychology whatsoever. But he was the star of the company and had a way the characters that he had, from Killer Khan to Kamala to all these big giant monster heels back then. Bundy, one after another, he was able to. That was kind of the beauty of how they built Hogan, was that he was able to carry it off, and he looked like a real, with the muscles and he had the right look, and he was. I wouldn't say there was anything wrong with his psychology, is what he needed at the time to get where he did. And I think that was probably Vince's psychology more than anything else.
What would your advice be to a young wrestler watching this? Say they have a match and the person that they're working is uncooperative and doesn't want to do the job or whatever. What should a young wrestler do? Should he try to work it out with a guy or go right to the promoter? And how would you handle something like that?
That's a tough one. It's a little bit of both. I mean, sometimes you gotta look at whether it's on purpose, whether it's unintentional. There's a big deciding factor there. I knew, like, for example, when I worked with Flair in the WWF, I mean, I know when he was champion, we were having really, really good matches, unbelievable matches. As soon as I won the title from him, some of our matches were they just started going down. Like, it was like I think Flair always thought I wasn't smart enough to know the difference. And I tried to treat him with respect, because I respected the fact that he dropped the belt to me. And I always thought he was an old pro that was just working the way he worked, But I finally, after a couple of months, went to Vince McMahon and I said, he's killing me. This guy's killing me every night. He's killing the matches, and I think it's on purpose. And I didn't have any choice. He's killing me off. And so that's a case of where I did go, and I had to kind of draw it to their attention that he was purposely bungling every night. And I was always like, oops, sorry about that out there tonight. And sometimes it was almost like I remember Flair coming back and going, fantastic. And I was like, are you kidding me? How is that fantastic? He didn't even give me a comeback. He had a small package, figure 4 in the middle of the match. I didn't even get a comeback. I said, if I'm going to be the star of the company, I'm going to have a comeback. What era did you come from? Where you think that I'm so stupid that I wouldn't know that I don't need a comeback? Like, okay, that was really good. Flair was a guy that was a little tricky in there. Some guys will take advantage of that way. There's a couple of things you can do. You can either just thump them, and that's where it comes back to whether you have a good background, you better back up what you need to do. sometimes you have to be a little forceful. You have to start throwing somebody around and start slamming them through the floor and stuff like that. Make them, you know, you want to work with me or work against me. And at the same time, you may find some guys that they're trying their hardest and they just don't have it. And that doesn't do any good to go at it that way. Then if you're going to start stiffing somebody or struggling with them, you're only going to make things harder. And I think if you're a smaller guy, you better be careful messing around with a bigger guy. You know, like if you're Rey Mysterio, you know, like the way Johnny Gonzalez is working with you, you better maybe just suck it up and just try to do the best you can.